Mr. President, first and foremost, prior to beginning my statement, I wish to once again voice the fact that I disagree with your decision to allow 3 member states of the European Union to participate in today's meeting under Rule 37. We have already repeatedly noted that statements from the European Union with the general position of member states on this question during a meeting on Ukraine would suffice entirely. This is all the more disappointing in light of the fact that you yourself, sir, at the beginning of your term, assumed the obligation to streamline and optimize issues of participation in Security Council meetings under Rule 37. We see here an example of double standards and inconsistency. Mr. President, we have just heard the latest selection of lamentations from our hypocritical Western colleagues about what Russian troops have been carrying out in recent days, strikes targeting military infrastructure-related targets and infrastructure related to military. They were indeed very impressive and effective. From among the targets that were struck is the Military Institute in Poltava, which was training specialists in communications, a hotel in Kryvyi Rog where officers of the Ukrainian intelligence services were residing. A number of important energy infrastructure were also destroyed, as well as aerodrome infrastructure of Ukraine, fuel depots, arsenals of Western aircraft weapons and artillery munitions, storage site and manufacturing sites for UAVs, areas of storage for uncrewed vessels, and areas for the accommodation for units of nationalist units and foreign mercenaries. A distinguishing feature of this spate of strikes was a significant the increase in the number of foreign instructors, specialists, and mercenaries. For this reason, those who are following this issue can anticipate a large number of obituaries about the sudden demise of highly specialized U.S., British, French, Polish, and Swedish military personnel. We, from the very beginning, cautioned that those who arrived to help the Zelensky clique maintain its military capabilities afloat or fighting to fight in its ranks will become targets of our legitimate targets for us, and those who are dying include more and more citizens from Western states, and this merely shows that the West is completely enmeshed in the Ukrainian conflict and now is undertaking tremendous efforts in order for the Zelensky regime to somehow be maintained afloat. And these efforts, of course, include the continuous deliveries to the Kiev junta of Western weapons, which we will discuss in detail during the meeting we requested to be held on 13 September. There have unfortunately been tragedies that are now the hallmark of the Ukrainian anti-air defense systems, which are experiencing difficulties. On the 30th of August in Kharkov, 7 people tragically died, including a child, and another 77 people, including 18 children, died as well. The anti-air defense, which had failed, was supposed to have destroyed itself, but this did not take place. There were other similar incidents that also took place. The reason for this is, as was the case in the past, and we repeatedly pointed to those reasons, the fact that Ukrainian anti-air systems are being placed in residential areas in violation of the principles of IHL, compliance with which our Western colleagues continuously call for. It would probably be useful for them to learn that the Ukrainian armed forces are not only openly placing firing positions in schools, kindergartens, and hospitals, but they are also transferring and having military vehicles be used as ambulances, and school buses are being used in the same way for military purposes. 2 such buses with the letters children had a collision in Ukraine in recent days, and the fact that military personnel were there was documented on social networks of the outraged Ukrainian users. In recent days, we have been carrying out strikes, and they have been very painful for the Kiev regime, and there's hysteria as a result with Western colleagues. And my question to you, Western colleagues, what did you expect when the Ukrainian leader, who instead of engaging in peace talks, he and his subordinates engaged in contacts with mediators from the global, instead of contacts with the global south, embraced the path of the Kursk misadventure and sent powerful, largely Western prepared fist and targeting the peaceful adjacent to Russia region. You did not warn him that these are actions that will result in reprisals and irrevocable punishment. And their Ukrainian nationalists killed 3 children, 10-year-old, 3 children from 10 to 12 years old in Malaya Loknya. Media outlets also had images of the Banderites' reprisals targeting ordinary civilians in that residential area who had convened at the square for further evacuation. And in Malay Lokna, at that point, there alone, approximately 10 people became casualties. The Ukrainian troops are abducting civilians who have not had the opportunity to evacuate. There's documented information and data about sexual violence by the mercenaries and Ukrainian radicals targeting civilians, and the Ukrainian soldiers who became POWs have acknowledged that the command has been instructed to fire upon civilians in Kursk Oblast if they are to resist, and we have video evidence that corroborates such criminal orders. All of you here who have said nothing about the crimes of the Ukrainian armed forces on the soil of Kursk, and nor did you mention the numerous instances of the Kiev regime firing on peaceful Russian cities. And this has taken place in recent days. On the 20th of August, in Zaporozhye Oblast, the Ukrainian armed forces used drones with munitions to target civilian vehicles. As a result, 1 child died on the spot and another 4 people were wounded. I draw your attention to the fact that drone operators have their targets perfectly visible to them, which makes such attacks deliberate. On the 29th of August, 5 Ukrainian drones targeted strikes against a hospital in Hindustan Oblast. A nurse was wounded. On the 30th of August, they deliberately fired on Belgorod and the Belgorod region with cluster munitions from the Czech-made MLRS, the Vampire MLRS. 5 civilians died. Dozens were wounded, including minors, and numerous residential buildings and homes were destroyed, as were vehicles and other civilian objects. On the 1st of September, the Zelensky regime undertook a large-scale attack targeting 15 Russian regions. The aircraft intercepted and destroyed 158 various unarmed uncrewed lethal vehicles. On the 2nd of September, the Kiev junta targeted a deliberate attack with missiles against a kindergarten in Belgorod. This was completely destroyed. Fortunately, there were no casualties, thanks to the fact that the works of kindergartens and other schools was stopped in areas that were not deemed safe. The conduct of large-scale attacks targeting densely populated areas on the 1st to the 2nd of September, that is the beginning of the school year, when many children were just beginning to attend school, points to the fact that it was indeed children who were the main target of the Kiev regime. On the 3rd of September, the Ukrainian drones targeted churches and social objects in Gruskaya and Belgorodchina, deliberately dropping explosives on the area. At the same time, there were 10 people at the church at the time, worshippers and workers. As a result, priest was concussed. On that same day in Donetsk, the Sokol market was struck, as a result of which 2 children died. They were born in 2011. In 2009, and a man died as well. 8 people were wounded, including children. Overall, since February 2022, in Belgorod Oblast, 16,434 instances of shelling of civilian infrastructure was reported, including 9,306 instances of artillery and MLRS, and 7,128 instances with drones. And this resulted in the deaths of 245 civilians, including 17 children. 1,483 people were wounded, including 112 children. 34,600 civilian objects have been damaged. Since the 1st of August alone, as a result of strikes by the Kiev regime targeting Belgorod's Oblast, 10 local civilians died, 157 were wounded, of them 14 were children, 2 hospitals were damaged, 13 shopping centers and stores, 2 houses of culture, 5 administrative buildings, an Orthodox church, industrial site, 2 pipelines, 4 power lines, a station, and 48 residential buildings, 1,037 apartments, as well as 140 private homes, 446 vehicles, and a number of agricultural infrastructure sites. There were strikes against Russian areas, as a result of which there are dead and wounded. I wish to stress that in a direct proximity to these objects, there was neither military infrastructure nor were there any military personnel. To be frank, we are no longer at all surprised at the blatant double standards of the Western sponsors of the Kiev regime. They have selective blindness in these cases, of which they have demonstrated for all 8 years, while the Kiev regime, inter alia, using the cover of the Minsk agreements, as they shelled the civilian cities in Donbass, towns and cities in Donbass. The same blindness is something which the U.S. and satellites has when the Kiev junta demonstrates and manifests its Nazi essence. Not only is it glorifying Nazi henchmen and Hitlerite henchmen who are responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent Jews, Poles, Russians, Roma, and Ukrainians who were murdered by the Nazi Ukrainian tormentors and executioners. This is clear to all that the Ukrainian military personnel have posted paraphernalia and images on the internet, not even trying to conceal their Nazi paraphernalia, symbolism, flags, and emblems. The courage only very few in the West can summon the courage to acknowledge this shameful issue. For example, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, during a visit to the Holocaust Museum in one of the Slovak cities, decided that it was possible to stress, and I quote, "We are all talking about fascism, Nazism. At the same time, we are silently tolerating the fact that in Ukraine, troops are rampant who have a very clear intention linked to movements which we believe are dangerous and that are prohibited. The international community needs to recognize that we cannot allow for in Ukraine troops to fight who use Nazi symbolism and frequently comport themselves as such. Once again, I stress this kind of rhetoric is something which we frequently hear in the West. We frequently encounter attempts to either sweep under the rug the facts which are inconvenient to the Kiev regime, or even to play into the hands of Ukrainian propagandists. For example, the position of Canada, whose authorities actively have been considering whether or not it is worth, as was planned at the urgence of the victims of the Holocaust, to publicize the list of 900 Nazi criminals who fled to that country after the defeat of fascist Germany. The arguments advanced against this step included the following: that the disclosure of the names is liable to make the Ukrainian community of Canada feel uncomfortable, as if this not take place a year ago, when in September 2023 in the House of Commons in Canada, there was a commemoration for the 14th Voluntary Infantry Division of the SS, the Galiciina Division. I refer to Yaroslav Glinko, who personally was welcomed by the head of the who participated during the visit and was honored when the head of the Kiev regime visited. It is hardly surprising that under such circumstances, this is something that the West is trying to cover up. The Nazism in Ukraine is flourishing entirely. Nazi criminals, and for example, the Ukrainian mission in Japan announced in its account on X on the 3rd of September, the ambassador of Ukraine to Japan, Karasunk, on September 3rd, Ambassador Sergei Karasunsky paid tribute to the Sukuni Shrine and mourned those who lost their lives for the country. And this, as we know, these are, as we are aware, 14 military criminals, Class A criminals, who were condemned by the International Criminal Tribunal for the Far East, which is known as the Tokyo trial, whose ashes are in Yasukuni. And they, as the Ukrainian are deemed to be, as the Ukrainian diplomat has determined to be, that they have lost their lives for their country. The main Japanese media outlets simply ignored this event, and the Japanese government continues as if nothing happened to provide cover for the Kiev regime and to provide them with weapons as well. I wish in this connection to draw attention to the following. That date, the 3rd of September, was hardly a coincidence. On that date, 3 September, in Russia and in many countries, the 79th anniversary of the victory over militarist Japan and the end of the Second World War were commemorated. Clearly, this initiative by the Ukrainian representative was dictated by attempts to rewrite history. Mr. President, in Russia, we will never tolerate attempts to whitewash those who perpetrated war crimes and crimes against humanity in a number of Western countries. Specifically, from the Japanese leadership, there has still been no repentance for the aggression against a host of states, including the USSR in the Far East, which incidentally was the condition for its acceptance as a member of the United Nations. At the same time, Tokyo and Western allies are so arrogant as to advance ambiguous and inappropriate allegations alleging that the USSR is responsible for the outbreak of the Second World War. Under these circumstances, it is hardly illogical that in recent years the Western camp, including Germany, Japan, and Italy, have voted against the annual resolution which we have submitted on the inadmissibility of the glorification of Nazism and the whitewashing of Nazi criminals. Western policy against the Kiev regime clearly shows that the fight against Nazism and neo-Nazism is not a part of its plans today, and yet it is a part of our plans, and we will not tolerate the presence of Nazis or neo-Nazis on our soil, and this is one of the goals and objectives of our special military operation. So have no doubt, Ukrainian Nazis and militarists will meet the same fate as their German and Japanese predecessors. Thank you for your attention.